In today's roundup of interesting and quirky stories, we look at overvalued Silicon Valley investors, a quirky successful startup, a quirky failed one, a strange way to stop hyperinflation, and how climate-conscious investing may not be to everyone's taste. So let's get on with it. One of the reasons why the myth and the legend of Silicon Valley exists is because we don't get to hear much about the startups that failed. We disproportionately learn about the billion-dollar successes, tinged with a sense of envy. The other reason for the myth and legend is we don't get to hear about the costs. There are no free lunches, especially with Silicon Valley investors. Could it be that the startups that did succeed with Silicon Valley money would have succeeded anyway? And those that did fail would have failed even with Silicon Valley money? That is hard to tell, but to my mind, the answer is not a no. What Silicon Valley investors are really good at is finding and then surfing the right wave. And while they are at it, making everyone else feel that the wave is their creation. Which is to say that they are good at spotting talent, and then finding a way to profit from it. In this short and slightly awkward write-up, we learn just a little bit about an interaction with a legend of Silicon Valley, Sam Altman. While it is commendable that people are writing their failure stories, what also catches the eye is what is not mentioned here. Like the cost of getting the $125,000 from Y Combinator. How much stake do they take in the startup for putting up that amount of cash? Because that is a very important piece of information. But overall, it's a nice short read, and probably worth your time. You'll be amazed to know that there was a time when allowing negative book reviews on Amazon was a path-breaking innovation. Mr. Bezos said, "I started receiving letters from well-meaning folks saying that perhaps you don't understand your business. You make money when you sell things. Why are you allowing negative reviews on your website? But our point of view is that we will sell more if we help people make purchasing decisions." Among other interesting arcana is the fact that Amazon hired over 500 people to answer book-related email queries from customers. Many were disillusioned academics, who were paid $10 to $13 per hour. People could answer up to a dozen emails per minute, and if your work rate fell below 7 emails per minute, you may be fired. It's all good because Amazon is such a huge success. All those weird little things that happened in the early days now feel quirky and adorable. What would have happened if Amazon wasn't the success that it is? Firstly, this story wouldn't have been written. And secondly, no one would read a story about how a company made some weird and quirky decisions and failed miserably. Because what people want to know are the companies that made weird and quirky decisions and succeeded wildly. All that is to say that people are weird. An example of a startup which made weird decisions and failed quite spectacularly is Theranos. Elizabeth Holmes was recently convicted of wire fraud, primarily because she took money from wealthy individuals on the pretext that Theranos made useful things, which turned out to be not entirely accurate. A convenient way to look at a startup is to think of it as a temporary Ponzi scheme, till it makes and sells a useful product or provides a useful service. In the initial phase, while it is still trying to figure out that product or service, the startup pulls in money on the promise of a brighter and more stable future, while the present is gloomy and rickety. Part of the money that comes in goes towards the operations, while some part is used to pay off the earlier investors. Which is not dissimilar to a Ponzi scheme, where money from new investors is used to pay off earlier investors, without really putting it to good use. It is important to note that how a startup may use the monies is not entirely a secret, and is usually well understood by the new, incoming investors, some of whom may even get to sit on the board of the company. However, there are many instances where plans don't work out. It may be because they were too ambitious, and reality intrudes. And investors may be pissed, and we have cases like Theranos. Saying that inflation is a strange beast may be an understatement. And one of the more strange incidents happened in Brazil in the 1980s, when the country was going through a phase of persistent hyperinflation. Prices were doubling every month. The problems started when the government printed a lot of money to build their new capital city, Brasilia, in the 1950s. One of the reasons controlling inflation was proving to be a hard problem to solve is because people had a deep-seated expectation that prices will go up. After all, they have been exposed to rapidly increasing prices over many decades. To bring back people's trust in the currency, that it will hold its value, the government issued a temporary, fictitious currency named URV, or Unit of Real Value. All prices were to be mentioned in URV, and the then local currency, Cruzeiro. The prices in URV will not change over time, while those in Cruzeiro may fluctuate, as it devalues over time due to the hyperinflation. After a few months, once people saw that URV prices were holding steady, the government scrapped Cruzeiro and made URV the legal tender, naming it the Brazilian Real. The most surprising part of the story is that this plan worked, and Brazil was able to get out of the cycle of hyperinflation. Of course, the government took other steps in parallel, like not printing as much money as before, and renegotiating external debt contracts, which also helped. This story is a quaint little reminder how one man's coal is another man's gold. Recently Vale, the big Brazilian miner, sold off its coal mines in Mozambique to Jindal of India, an integrated steel maker. That is the expected part of the story, where companies from the richer and more developed Western world are encouraged by their shareholders and other constituents to become less harmful to the environment. And it was expected that in a coal mine sale like this, mining and integrated steel-making companies from large developing nations like China and India would put in their bids. What was surprising in the story was the more than 30 private equity firms from US and Western Europe, who also showed initial interest in buying the coal mine, primarily because the asset was available at not very exorbitant prices, and could make for a good investment. One way to think about all this is that while some environmentally conscious investors are willing to forego opportunities to make money if it means less harm to the environment, it may present lucrative investment opportunities to others who may not share similar priorities about the climate. So that's it for this one. The links to these stories are in the description. Give them a read if you'd like. Also, consider subscribing to the channel if you enjoyed the video, as it helps out this tiny channel a lot. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.